Marcus was a man who carried the world on his shoulders. He was not famous, not rich, and not someone people would notice if he walked down the street. But inside him lived a strength that few could see, a strength born out of struggle. Life had not been kind to him. He had once dreamed of building a happy family with the woman he loved, but those dreams had crumbled. Now, as a single father, he woke up every morning knowing he had to fight not for himself, but for his little daughter, Lily. His days always started before sunrise. The alarm clock would ring, and even though his body begged for a few more minutes of sleep, Marcus would force himself to rise. There was no time to rest. He had to prepare Lily for school, pack her lunch, and make sure she was cared for before heading to his job. He worked at a warehouse, lifting heavy boxes, moving crates, and pushing carts for hours at a time. The pay was small, the work exhausting, and yet it was all he had. Most people at the warehouse went home to partners who shared their burdens. Marcus went home to a quiet apartment where the only sound was the laughter or crying of his child. Bills piled up on his kitchen table, electricity, rent, school fees, and each envelope felt like a fresh wound. Some nights, he sat staring at them, wondering how long he could keep up this fight. But when Lily climbed into his lap and hugged him, whispering, "Daddy, I love you," his doubts melted into determination. Marcus was not perfect. He had moments of anger, moments when exhaustion made him short-tempered, moments when he questioned why life had chosen him for this path. But no matter how heavy the burden, he always kept moving forward. He cooked cheap meals, stretched every dollar, and sacrificed his own needs so Lily would never feel the emptiness he sometimes carried in his heart. Still, the loneliness was hard. Nights were the woe. Rest. When Lily was asleep, the apartment felt hollow. Marcus would sit by the window, staring at the city lights, wondering if anyone truly understood how much he carried alone. Friends had drifted away, family was distant, and the woman who had once promised to stand by his side was gone. All he had left was responsibility and love. He found himself talking to God sometimes, not with fancy prayers, but in whispered questions. Why me? Why this life? Why so hard? And yet deep down, he knew the answer. Life was not punishing him. It was shaping him. Every hardship was teaching him patience, endurance, and compassion. Despite the pain, Marcus still smiled for his daughter. He cracked silly jokes, told her bedtime stories, and tried to give her a childhood that felt normal. He wanted her to grow up believing in hope, even when hope seemed far away from him. She was the reason he never gave up. But on the inside, Marcus carried scars. He remembered nights of hunger when he had gone without food so his daughter could eat. He remembered the embarrassment of asking for help and being turned away. He remembered the cold winters when the heater barely worked, and he wrapped Lily in blankets, praying the morning would come quickly. These memories lived inside him like shadows, but they also pushed him forward. To the world, Marcus was just another tired man walking home late at night, wearing worn-out shoes and clothes that had seen better days. But to his daughter, he was a hero, the man who always showed up, the man who held her hand when she was afraid, the man who never let go. And though Marcus never said it aloud, he feared breaking. Every day, he wondered how much longer he could carry this weight. His back ached, his spirit sometimes cracked, and his future looked uncertain. Yet, he kept going, because quitting was not an option when someone else depended on him. On that particular evening, as Marcus walked home from work, the struggle weighed heavier than usual. His boss had reminded him that temporary workers could be replaced at any time. The bills at home were overdue. Lily had asked for a school trip fee that he didn't know how to pay. The air felt colder, the city louder, and Marcus's heart heavier than ever. But what Marcus didn't know was that his journey, his pain, and his unseen strength were about to matter in a way he never expected. Life, in its strange and mysterious way, was about to place him at a crossroads, not just for himself, but for someone else who stood at the edge of giving up. Marcus thought he was the one barely holding on, But soon, he would realize that his own struggles had prepared him for a moment where his strength could save another life. The evening sky stretched over the city like a heavy blanket, its colors fading from gold to a deep shade of gray. Marcus walked slowly, his steps dragging against the cracked pavement, every stride carrying the weight of exhaustion. His work shift had been longer than usual, and his back ached from lifting crates all day. The warehouse floor was noisy, the air filled with dust, and the supervisors barked orders like machines. By the time Marcus clocked out, his shirt clung to him with sweat, and his arms felt as though they had carried the whole world. The city around him was alive, horns blaring, neon lights flashing, and strangers rushing past with determined expressions. Yet Marcus felt apart from it all. He walked among people but carried an invisible wall around him. His thoughts drowned out the city noise, pulling him into his own world of worries. Rent was due in 2 days. Lily's school had sent a notice about overdue fees. The electricity bill threatened disconnection. His daughter's innocent smile gave him strength, but the numbers in his head chased him like shadows he could not escape. He passed by a small convenience store and paused for a moment, staring at the window. Inside, a father laughed with his teenage son, buying snacks and drinks. The sight made Marcus's chest tighten. He had joy with Lily, yes, but he couldn't give her extras. No weekend outings, no movie nights, no new clothes without sacrifice. He sighed, lowering his gaze, and kept walking. The bridge was up ahead. Marcus always crossed it on his way home. Some nights, he admired the view, the water below reflecting city lights, the wind carrying the smell of fresh rain, the quietness compared to the crowded streets. But tonight, the bridge felt colder, lonelier. The streetlights above flickered, casting long, shaky shadows across the walkway. Few people crossed it this late, and Marcus calmed the solitude. As he stepped onto the bridge, his thoughts deepened. He remembered his late wife, the woman who had left him years ago. Sometimes he wondered if she had felt the same crushing weight he now carried, the weight of responsibility. "Why did she leave me to do this alone?" he whispered under his breath. The wind answered with silence. His boots tapped against the concrete, the sound echoing faintly. He rubbed his hands together, both to warm them and to distract himself from the tight knot in his chest. Above him, the sky was clear now, sprinkled with stars barely visible through the haze of the city. He thought of Lily, curled up in bed, hugging her stuffed toy, waiting for him to tuck her in when he got home. That image always brought him comfort. But on this night, fate had something different in store. As Marcus neared the middle of the bridge, he slowed. There was a figure ahead, standing very close to the edge. At first, he thought it might be a jogger resting or someone taking in the view, but the stillness of the figure told a different story. Shoulders hunched, arms stiff, head lowered. Something about the posture screamed despair. Marcus's pace quickened. He squinted under the dim light. It was a young woman, no more than her early 20s, dressed in a simple coat that flapped in the wind. Her hands gripped the railing tightly, her body leaning forward ever so slightly. The river below roared with the current, dark and unforgiving. Marcus's heart skipped. He had seen enough pain in his own life to recognize it in someone else. This was not someone pausing to admire the view. This was someone moments away from letting go. For a second, Marcus froze. A storm of thoughts rushed through his mind. Should he intervene? What if she didn't want help? What if she was dangerous? But then he imagined Lily, older, standing on this very bridge with no one to stop her. His fatherly instinct roared to life, louder than his fear. He knew he had to act. He took a cautious step forward, his voice soft but firm. "Hey," he began, unsure of what to say. The woman didn't move, didn't look back. The wind carried only silence. Marcus's chest tightened as he realized how fragile the moment was. One wrong word, one sudden movement, and she might leap. He stopped a few feet away, his heart pounding. Sweat trickled down his temples despite the cold air. The city seemed distant now, its noise fading under the weight of this fragile encounter. It was just him, her, and the deep darkness of the river waiting below. Marcus drew in a shaky breath. He had never been a man of many words, but he knew he had to find the right ones. Words that carried truth. Words that could reach her heart before it was too late. And so, standing on that lonely bridge, a struggling father who thought he had nothing left to give, prepared to offer the only thing he still had, his voice, his compassion, and his desperate hope that it might be enough to save her. Marcus stopped in his tracks, his breath caught in his throat. The figure on the bridge was no longer just a shadow. Under the flickering streetlight, he could see her more clearly now. A young woman, maybe 20 or 21, stood frozen against the railing. Her posture was stiff, as though her body was both bracing against the cold and fighting the storm inside her mind. Her hair whipped wildly in the night wind, strands flying across her pale, tear-streaked face. One of her shoes dangled loosely from her foot, half slipping off as she leaned a little too close to the edge. Her coat was thin, hardly enough to shield her from the chill that rolled across the bridge. Marcus noticed her knuckles, white from the grip she had on the railing, clinging to it as if it was the only thing tethering her to the world. The river below seemed to roar louder, as if hungry for another soul. The lights of the city reflected in its restless surface, glittering like broken glass. Marcus felt his heart pound harder against his ribs. He had seen exhaustion before, he lived it every day, but this wasn't exhaustion. This was surrender. He took another step forward, slow and careful, his boots crunching softly against the concrete. He didn't want to startle her. His mind raced, searching for words, but nothing came. All he could think was how fragile she looked, like a thin branch ready to snap under pressure. From where he stood, he could hear her muttering softly. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then the words became clearer. She was talking to herself. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "It doesn't matter anymore. Nobody cares. Nobody will miss me." Marcus's chest tightened. The sound of her despair pierced through him, cutting deeper than he expected. He had said similar words to himself on lonely nights, when the bills piled up and the weight of responsibility felt unbearable. He knew what hopelessness sounded like, but hearing it from someone so young shook him to his core. For a moment, he imagined his own daughter, Lily, years from now, standing in that same position, whispering the same words. The thought made his legs weak. He couldn't allow it. He couldn't stand by and watch this young woman disappear into the darkness. "Hey," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't want to scare her, but he needed her to know she wasn't alone. The woman flinched at the sound. She turned her head slightly, her eyes red and swollen, her lips trembling. For a split second, she looked at him, not with anger, but with emptiness, as if his presence was just another burden on her shoulders. Then she turned back toward the water. Marcus's pulse quickened. He wanted to run toward her, to grab her before she did something irreversible, but he knew sudden movements could push her over the edge. He had to be careful. Every second mattered. Every word mattered. "You don't have to do this," he said softly, taking another small step forward. His voice shook, but there was a raw honesty in it. "I know it feels like the world doesn't care, but I care. Right now, I care." The girl didn't respond. Her shoulders rose and fell with uneven breaths. She lifted one leg slightly, as though testing how it would feel to step over. Marcus's heart nearly stopped. His body screamed at him to sprint, to pull her back, but his mind told him he had to hold steady, to let his words reach her first. The air between them was heavy with tension. The wind howled through the gaps of the railing, carrying away the last warmth of the day. Marcus swallowed hard, sweat trickling down his temple despite the cold. He thought about Lily again, about how every time he wanted to give up, he chose to hold on because of her. Maybe this young woman didn't have someone to hold on for. Maybe tonight she needed him to be that someone. He cleared his throat, his voice breaking louder this time. "Don't leap." The words ripped out of him with more force than he intended, a desperate plea that echoed across the bridge. The young woman froze. Her grip on the railing tightened, but her movement stopped. Slowly, she turned her head, her wide, tearful eyes locking onto Marcus. For the first time, he saw the full depth of her pain, fear, anger, sorrow, and something even more haunting, the quiet wish to disappear. But his words had reached her. He could see it in the way her body stilled, the way her lips parted as if she had forgotten how to breathe. Marcus's chest rose and fell rapidly, his hands trembling at his sides. He had no plan, no idea what would happen next. All he knew was that he couldn't let go of that fragile thread of hope he had just thrown her way. And in that frozen moment on the bridge, between the rushing river and the silent night sky, a strug. Ling father and a broken young woman stood locked in an unspoken battle, not against each other, but against the darkness that threatened to consume them both. The young woman's eyes locked with Marcus's for only a moment, but that single glance felt like an eternity. Her face was a storm, tears streaked her cheeks, her lips quivered, and her eyes carried the unbearable weight of someone who had lost all reason to keep living. Marcus could feel her pain without her saying a single word. It was raw, it was real, and it shook him more deeply than he could have imagined. He took in a breath, steadying his trembling hands. His instinct as a father, as a man who had known struggle, screamed at him to do something, but he also knew this moment was fragile. A wrong word could shatter her fragile grip on life. He had to reach her heart, not with pity, not with empty promises, but with truth. "I've been where you are," Marcus said, his voice low and rough with emotion. "I know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like you're screaming inside and nobody hears." The girl's fingers twitched against the railing. Her body shifted, just a fraction, as though she were listening despite herself. She didn't speak, but Marcus noticed she hadn't moved closer to the edge. That was enough to keep him talking. "I wake up every day wondering how I'll survive the next one," Marcus continued, stepping forward carefully. "I've got a little girl at home. She's my whole world, and there are nights I cry myself to sleep because I feel like I'm not enough for her. Nights when the weight is so heavy, I want to let go." His words cracked, his voice breaking into a raw honesty he hadn't shared with anyone. He wasn't performing, he wasn't trying to be a hero. He was simply laying bare his truth, hoping it could pierce through her darkness. The girl's shoulders shuddered. Her grip on the railing loosened slightly, though her gaze stayed fixed on the river below. Marcus could see the battle inside her, her body leaning toward despair, her heart hesitated, aching for a reason to hold on. "You're not alone," Marcus whispered. "I don't know your story. I don't know your pain. But I know what it feels like to stand where you're standing, to believe the world won't notice if you vanish. But I notice. Right now, I see you, I hear you, and I care." The wind howled across the bridge, whipping at his coat, carrying his words into the night. The young woman finally spoke, her voice so faint Marcus almost missed it. "No one cares," she whispered, her words breaking like glass. "No one ever has." Marcus's heart clenched. He had heard those words before, in his own head, late at night, when the silence was suffocating. He stepped closer, keeping his voice gentle. "I care," he said firmly. "Right now, in this moment, I care about you more than you know. And I swear to you, even if you feel like the whole world turned its back, it doesn't mean your life isn't worth living. You're still here. That means something." The girl shook her head, tears falling freely now. "I'm tired," she said, her voice trembling. "So tired of hurting, so tired of pretending everything is okay." Marcus felt his own eyes sting with tears. He didn't hide them. He let them fall because maybe she needed to see that her pain wasn't hers to carry alone. "I'm tired too," he admitted, his voice shaking. "I wake up every day exhausted, wondering if I can make it one more hour. But every time I think I can't, I look at my daughter. She's my reason. And maybe tonight, maybe you need to find your reason. And if you don't have one yet, let me be that reason. Let my words be enough to keep you here just a little longer." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the rushing river below. The girl's breathing grew uneven, her body trembling as if every word Marcus spoke was pushing against the wall of despair that had been built inside her. Finally, her voice cracked open again. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." Marcus took another step, closing the distance just slightly. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, he saw not just despair, but confusion. She didn't understand why a stranger would fight for her life. "Because I know what it's like to wish someone would stop me," he answered, his voice steady now. "I know what it's like to hope, even in the smallest, quietest way, that someone will notice. I'm here because I notice you, and because no one should face this moment alone." Her grip on the railing loosened more. Her knuckles were no longer white, though her fingers still clung faintly to the cold metal. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Marcus could feel it, the thread of hope stretching between them, fragile but real. He extended his hand, slowly, carefully. The gesture was small but powerful. "Come back," he whispered. "Step away from the edge. You don't have to leap. You don't have to end your story here. Please, let me help you." The girl's eyes flickered down to his hand, then back to his face. For the first time, Marcus saw something change in her expression. The emptiness in her eyes wasn't gone, but it cracked, revealing the faintest glimmer of hesitation. The world seemed to hold its breath. The cars on the distant highway, the city lights, the rushing river, all of it faded into silence. There was only Marcus, the struggling father who had poured out his soul, and the broken young woman teetering on the edge of her fate. And in that fragile silence, the cry from Marcus's heart reached hers. Marcus felt his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The young woman's trembling fingers still clung to the cold railing, but now her gaze flickered toward his hand. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, the river below roaring silently in his ears, the wind howling like it wanted to sweep her away, and the faint glow of streetlights casting long shadows across the bridge. He took a cautious step closer, extending his hand slowly. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice steady now, carrying the weight of every struggle he had ever endured. "I've got you. Just take my hand. Please." She hesitated. Marcus could see the conflict in her eyes. Fear, doubt, disbelief. Every instinct told her to step away from him, to retreat into the only place that had felt safe, even if that safety was death. But another part of her, a tiny spark buried beneath layers of pain, flickered, responding to the raw sincerity in his voice. Marcus's gaze never left hers. "I know it's hard. I know it feels impossible. But you don't have to do this alone. Not tonight. Not ever." He took another careful step, closing the small gap between them. The wind threatened to push her, but he held his ground. Time seemed to stretch, every second loaded with urgency and hope. Marcus could feel his own desperation intertwining with hers, as if their fates were tethered by the thin thread of this moment. Then, slowly, she moved, just a fraction. Her hand wavered, hovering in the air, inches from his. Marcus held his breath, every muscle in his body taut, ready to react if she slipped. You really mean it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the river's roar. Marcus nodded, his eyes filled with tears he didn't bother to hide. "I mean it. I care about you. I don't know your story, but I know you matter. You're still here for a reason, and I want to help you find it." Her fingers brushed against his. It was tentative, a delicate touch that carried all the fear, pain, and hesitation she had been holding inside. Marcus tightened his grip gently, careful not to hurt her, but strong enough to anchor her to life. For a long, tense moment, neither of them moved. Then she let go of the railing completely, placing her other hand into his. Marcus felt the weight of her entire body leaning into him, fragile and trembling, and he pulled her slowly away from the edge. Every step backward was deliberate, careful, a dance between fear and trust. The wind continued to howl, and the cold seeped through their clothes, but Marcus barely noticed. His focus was entirely on keeping her safe. When their feet finally touched solid ground a few feet from the edge, Marcus exhaled deeply, relief flooding through him like a wave. The young woman collapsed onto the pavement, tears streaming freely down her face. Marcus knelt beside her, his own chest heaving, matching hers in ragged breaths. "You're safe now," he said gently. "You're safe." She shook, trembling, trying to find words but unable to form them. Marcus didn't force conversation. He simply held her, a steady presence, a human anchor in a world that had felt like it was falling apart. Minutes passed. The city noises began to seep back into their awareness. The distant hum of traffic, the faint laughter of late-night pedestrians. But Marcus didn't move. He knew that rushing her, or letting go now, could undo everything. Finally, she looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and something else. Gratitude, perhaps, or the faintest spark of hope. "Why? Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marcus smiled weakly, exhausted, his voice hoarse. "Because I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to want to disappear. And because I can't imagine a world where anyone has to face this alone." Her hands clutched his as if anchoring herself not just physically, but emotionally. Marcus realized in that moment that the act of saving someone was more than just pulling them from danger. It was about showing them that life, even when unbearably heavy, still offered connection, compassion, and hope. The young woman leaned back slightly, taking in her surroundings, the river, the city lights, the cold metal of the railing she had clung to. For the first time that night, she felt a flicker of life return, fragile but undeniable. Marcus offered her a hand to help her stand, and together they stepped away from the edge completely, leaving the temptation of surrender behind. Marcus knew the danger wasn't fully gone, not just yet, but the immediate threat had passed. He had turned a moment of despair into a moment of survival. And in doing so, he discovered something profound about himself. That strength is not just about enduring your own struggles, it's about reaching out to lift someone else from theirs. As they moved to a safer spot on the bridge, the young woman finally whispered a shaky, "Thank you." But Marcus could see in her eyes that words were no longer enough. Tonight, actions had spoken louder than any words could. And for the first time in hours, or maybe years, both of them felt the faintest glimmer of hope, fragile and flickering, like a candle fighting the darkness. The wind had died down slightly, leaving the bridge unusually quiet. The city's usual hum of traffic and distant sirens seemed muted, as if the world itself was giving them space to breathe. Marcus guided the young woman to a safer spot, away from the railing, where the cold concrete felt a little less harsh and the night didn't seem quite so threatening. She slumped against the wall, hugging her knees, her face buried in her hands. Marcus knelt beside her, unsure where to start. There was no manual for moments like this, no guide for talking to someone whose pain ran so deep that life itself had become unbearable. "You don't have to say anything," Marcus said gently. "Just breathe. That's enough for now." She lifted her head slowly, her eyes red and swollen. It's been so long," she whispered. "So long that I've wanted it all to end." Marcus nodded, understanding without judgment. I know that feeling. I've been there too, though it wasn't always obvious to anyone else. It's like carrying a weight no one can see, and sometimes it feels like it's too heavy to hold." She looked at him then, really looked, as though seeing him for the first time. There was curiosity mixed with disbelief. "You understand?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Marcus smiled faintly, not the kind of smile that hides pain, but the kind that acknowledges it. "I do. I've had nights when I wanted to disappear, when I thought the world would be better off without me. But then I remember who's counting on me, who needs me, even when I don't feel like I'm enough." The young woman's eyes softened, but the shadows in them remained. "I don't have anyone," she admitted. "No one to care, No one to notice. No one to stop me. Her voice broke, and Marcus felt a pang of empathy so strong it almost hurt. "You do now," he said simply. "I'm here. You're not alone tonight, and I promise. See, even if it's just for a little while, someone sees you, someone cares." She took a shaky breath, her body trembling from more than just the cold. Marcus realized that this moment wasn't just about saving her life physically. It was about saving her from the crushing weight of isolation, from the feeling that no one could ever understand her pain. "What's your name?" Marcus asked softly, careful to keep the conversation gentle. "Erica," she said after a pause. "Erica Thompson." "Erica," Marcus repeated, as if saying her name out loud anchored her to reality. "I'm Marcus, and I know we just met, but right now, your life matters to me." Erica's lips quivered. "You don't even know me." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but I know enough. I know what it feels like to carry a weight that makes the world unbearable. And I also know that sometimes, all it takes is one person to reach out to remind you it's not over yet." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching for honesty, for truth in his words. And she found it. There was no pity in Marcus's gaze, no condescension, just understanding. For the first time, she let herself speak, recounting pieces of her life in broken sentences. Family problems, betrayals, the feeling of being unseen, unheard, and unloved. She told him about friends who abandoned her, about nights spent alone crying, about dreams that had died long before she had. Each word was heavy, laden with despair, yet spoken with a quiet relief, as though releasing them into the open air made them a little lighter. Marcus listened, never interrupting, nodding, acknowledging her pain. Occasionally, he would place a comforting hand on her shoulder, gentle and grounding. He didn't have all the answers, but he didn't need them. Presence, compassion, and the willingness to listen, that was enough. "You're strong," he said finally, after a long silence. "Even standing here tonight, even feeling like everything is too much, you're still fighting. That takes more courage than most people will ever know." Erica's eyes widened, and a tear escaped down her cheek. "I don't feel strong," she whispered. "No," Marcus said softly. "You don't feel strong. But that doesn't mean you're not. Feeling weak doesn't erase your courage. Right now, you're alive, and you've reached out, even if it's just to me. That's strength." For the first time that night, Erica smiled faintly. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a flicker of hope breaking through the darkness. They talked for hours, or maybe it was minutes. Time felt irrelevant. Marcus shared parts of his own life, struggles as a single father, long nights worrying about bills and responsibilities, the exhaustion of always having to be strong for someone else. And in that exchange, something remarkable happened. Two broken souls found solace in each other's presence. Pain met understanding, despair met compassion, and slowly, the heavy weight Erica had carried began to lighten. By the end of the night, Erica wasn't fully healed, not yet, but she felt something she hadn't in a long time. A connection, a reason to hold on, a small spark that maybe life could be bearable again. Marcus knew his work wasn't done. There would be help to find, conversations to continue, support to provide. But in that moment, just being there, listening, and caring, that had saved her from the edge. And as they finally stepped away from the railing, both aware that dawn was approaching and that life awaited them beyond the bridge, Marcus realized something profound. Sometimes saving someone else doesn't require grand gestures. Just a willingness to see, to listen, and to care when the world has turned away. The night had deepened into quiet stillness, and the city lights cast a soft glow across the bridge. Marcus and Erica sat side by side on a worn bench, the cold metal beneath them uncomfortable but insignificant compared to the storm of emotions both had endured. For a long time, neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. The shared silence carried a weight far greater than speech. Finally, Erica took a shaky breath, her fingers entwined nervously. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling. Marcus turned to look at her, sensing the gravity in her tone. "What is it?" he asked softly, ready for anything. She hesitated, staring at the river below, its dark currents reflecting the city lights like shards of broken glass. I'm not who you think I am," she whispered. Her words hung in the air, fragile and loaded with tension. Marcus furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Erica took another deep breath. "I'm connected to your past, more than you know. My mother, she knew you when you were young. Before everything fell apart, she always spoke about you, about the man she knew you could be." Marcus's heart skipped. He had known hardship, but he had never expected this. "My mother? My past?" he asked, confusion and curiosity mixing in his voice. "Yes," Erica continued, tears glistening in her eyes. "I grew up hearing stories about you, stories that weren't always kind, but they shaped me. And tonight, when I was ready to let go, somehow you were here. Somehow you reached me." Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. The coincidence was uncanny, almost impossible. How could a man, worn down by life, end up at the exact place someone from his past needed him the most? He wanted to ask more, but Erica wasn't finished. "My mother. She always said you had a strong heart, even when life was unfair, and she was right, because tonight, without knowing it, you became the reason I'm still here. You didn't just save me from falling off this bridge, you saved me from giving up on everything." Marcus sat in silence for a moment, letting her words sink in. He had spent years feeling invisible, like his struggles were unnoticed, his efforts meaningless. But now he realized that every act of perseverance, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, it had led him here. Every hardship had shaped him into someone capable of saving a life tonight. Erica continued, her voice shaking but growing stronger. "There's more. My mother, she's been sick. I was supposed to be with her when she passed, but I ran away. I felt like life had nothing for me. I thought, maybe I didn't deserve to keep living. But tonight, seeing you, talking to you, I realized I wasn't alone, and I don't want to leave things unfinished anymore." Marcus reached out and gently held her hand, his grip steady and reassuring. "Erica, it's not your fault. Life is complicated, and we all carry burdens we can't see. But what matters is that you're here now. You're alive, and that means there's still time for everything else, healing, forgiveness, and finding your path." Erica looked at him, a mixture of awe and disbelief in her eyes. You really mean that?" Marcus nodded firmly. "I do. And I want you to remember this. Strength isn't always about never feeling broken. Sometimes strength is about standing up, even when you've been knocked down 1,000 times. Tonight, you found that strength again, and I promise, you don't have to face the rest of your journey alone." She leaned back, letting herself absorb the words, the warmth of human connection. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt a flicker of hope, small but undeniable, as though the darkness that had consumed her could finally be pushed back. Then, with a shaky laugh, she added, "I can't believe this. After all these years, after everything, I run to the edge, and it's you standing here, the man my mother told me about all my life." Marcus's heart ached with emotion. He realized something profound in that moment. The universe has a strange way of weaving lives together, of placing people in each other's paths when they are needed most. All the pain, the struggle, and the sacrifice, it wasn't meaningless. It had prepared him for this exact moment, to be someone else's lifeline. Erica's revelation hung between them, heavier than the cold night air. It changed everything. This wasn't just a random encounter on a bridge. It was fate, destiny, a connection that neither of them could ignore. And for Marcus, it was a reminder that even when life seemed unbearable, Even when hope felt impossible, small acts of courage and compassion could ripple through time and alter the course of lives in ways he could never have imagined. They stayed on the bridge until the first hint of dawn touched the sky, painting the city in soft shades of pink and gold. The danger was gone, but the weight of the night had left a mark on both of them, a reminder of how fragile life is and how powerful the human heart can be. By the time they finally rose to leave, Marcus knew that this encounter would not be forgotten. And Erica, once on the edge of despair, felt the stirrings of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope, purpose, and the courage to keep going. For both of them, the revelation was clear. Life has a way of connecting souls when they need each other most, and sometimes people who save us are the ones we least expect, but are meant to find us exactly when we need them.